Let's talk about pricing. When you look at price, there are two factors, supply and demand. We'll begin with demand. What is the determinant of demand? What is it that makes you want that product? Well, price is one of the factors. The price of related goods, be they complementary or substitute goods. Your income would be a factor. If you've got money, you might want something. If you don't have any money, you might just not be buying it at any price. Taste and expectations are also factors. So if you wanted some baklava, you might think to yourself, hey, let me have some coffee that goes with it. That means your demand for coffee is actually a complement to the baklava. On the other hand, instead of coffee, you might decide to have Hell brand energy drink. That would be a substitute for coffee. Both are loaded with caffeine. Both give you high energy. Now when it comes to supply, the most important things are technology and factor costs, the cost of the goods that you buy to manufacture the item. So grain would be used to make bread, as an example. Grapes would be used to make wine. And the technology is usually what's going to allow that to come in at cheaper prices. Now here's a simple example. Art sold on the street is going to be cheaper than art sold in a store because there's no rent cost. You can supply it at a lower price. So typically when we talk about pricing and quantities, we talk about this curve here. We've got the law of demand, shows the demand curve from upper left to lower right, supply curve going from lower left to upper right, because at high prices there's little demand but lots of supply. At low prices there's high demand but there's low supply. Now these points here refer to the equilibrium price, the equilibrium quantity, and the point of equilibrium. That's where the market clearing takes place, where all demand is met by supply at that price, market clearing. So there should be no goods left over and nobody who wanted it at that price but weren't allowed to buy it. Now here's a typical chart showing a gallon of gas, the price going from $5 to $1, and consumers at $5, some won't consume it at all, some will consume 1 or 2 maybe gallons. You see the total market is going to be 5 for that. And at $1, you see the total market is going to be 22 because more people will buy gas at lower prices. That's the law of demand. Supply, at $5, everybody's willing to supply gas. You have a market of 26. But at $1, not everybody's willing to. Some of the gas companies are out of business and they're not going to make that much. So the market supply is only 4 at $1. So let's take a look at the market clearing. $3 is the market clearing price because the demand is 13 and the supply is 13. So 13 people buy it at $3 and 13 people sell it and everybody's happy. If the government institutes a price control of $2 a gallon, you'll see that demand at $2 would have been 15 and supply would only be 12. That means there are 3 people unhappy. They can't get the gas that they wanted at that market price because of course it's not a market clearing price, it's a government imposed price. Now let's talk about what happens simply when taxes are added to a product. If you in a free market had a particular equilibrium price and quantity and then you add a tax, by definition people aren't going to say, oh well, we'll pay more just because there's a tax. You have in your own mind whether you're paying $1 or $2 for that soda or that gas or that candy bar, whatever it is, and you don't really care how much of that is tax and how much of it is for the store. One of the things about America, we price things at 99 cents and then when you go in to buy it, you find it's $1.08 because when we price things, the sign doesn't include the tax. So that way we're always conscious of what we're paying in tax. If you go to Europe and you buy something for €2, it's going to be €2, tax already included, which means they're actually hiding the tax. But either way, the price is what it is. So by adding a tax, you end up decreasing the quantity at equilibrium and you increase the price. Now let's talk about a shock to the supply chain. That's when perhaps an earthquake, a tsunami, a snowstorm, a monsoon, something happens that maybe storefronts can't get open, maybe power's down in the city, or maybe the roads are not clear and trucks can't get the supply in. So you've got a shock to the supply chain, less supply is available. So naturally you can see that the price should rise and the quantity should decrease. It's very simple to see that. It looks a lot like a tax. But the important thing is to recognize is that's what should happen. The price should rise when there's a shock to the supply chain and the quantity should decrease. Okay, so everybody's trying to get out of town because of the tsunami. They can't get the gas in, they can't get goods into market. That we would expect the prices to go up. And one of the things that happens when prices go up is people buy less, which means maybe if you needed gas to get off to get out of town before the tsunami hits, then maybe you and your buddy, your next door neighbor, buy 1 gallon of gas between you and you both go in the same car and you leave one car behind rather than both of you driving separate cars. That's one example. Or perhaps if you need some toilet paper, you buy 1 roll and not 20 rolls because you know the price has gone up and you're just going to get through for the weekend. Or you buy just enough corn to last you the next couple of days. You don't buy a month's supply. But when the government imposes a price control, so they say maybe the price cannot rise just because there's a storm or a hurricane or a tsunami, what happens is suppliers there are less of them, and therefore the equilibrium quantity is going to be far less in supply than the demand, because at that same price that it was originally at, everybody's going to have the same amount of demand. So there's going to create shortages. Now, if that price is kept that way for a long time, what happens is in economics there's a short run and a long run. In the short run, you can't change many factors, but in the long run, you can change factors. So the supply curve will shift. If you were growing potatoes and suddenly the price of potatoes falls, there's not much you can do. You still have to harvest those potatoes and sell them. But next year, you can grow corn instead of potatoes, or soybean, or some other product. So in the long run, things can change. Now let's just talk briefly about organ donation, which is generally illegal. Okay, if there was a free market for, say, kidneys, we all have 2 and we only need 1, so you could sell them on the open market, and there would be a price, equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. However, it's illegal. So what does that mean? Supply is very limited. Meanwhile, demand is very high. Anybody who potentially needs a kidney is going to want it, but obviously they're not going to get it necessarily. There's going to be a shortage if the only way we can have organs is a price of 0. People are very hesitant to give up their organs when they can't get paid for it. So that's a little bit about pricing.